Welcome in to the latest episode of Formula One, presented by the Betting the Pitch Podcast Network. I'm your host, _G Warner. I'm joined by Roscoe Poop Scoop, Angel. We had two picks last week on the the Japan GP, Japan Grand Prix, and we both picked Max Verstappen. And guess who won the Japan GP? It was actually Red Bull number one, Max Verstappen. So we finally gave out some winners. It only took us a couple episodes, which I think is a huge return on investment. Welcome back to at Roscoe Poop Scoop, Roscoe. Poop like you know how to spell it, scoop like you know how to spell it on Twitter. If you want to go find some more F1 chatter, go check it out. Angel, besides celebrating us as the greatest ever, the best to ever do it, both 13% long shots, and I guess not that long, but third most likely to win, and we picked the right driver. How are you feeling heading into Bahrain?
Good. I guess really quick recap on the Japanese Grand Prix before we jump into Bahrain because it's kind of again like when we compare Chinese Grand Prix with Japanese Grand Prix, we said like the track and what we expect from the race would be very different. And I think that's gonna be the same as we look at Japanese going to Bahrain this weekend, right? Um, but Japanese, I was just like I was texting you. I thought it was a pretty boring race, to be honest. But that we kind of talk about it on the Japanese on that episode is two things to look out for the Japanese Grand Prix, right? The track position, which from your qualification because it's so hard to overtake, and it turned out to be 90% accurate because if you look at our top 10, we only had one swap off the position between Lewis Hamilton and Isaac Haja, right? And the rest all stay the same where they start, where they finish. And that proven sort of the point, it's hard to take overtake. And the other one is a driver ability. And then we all know the raw talents within Max Verstappen, and which is why he won. He pulled one of the amazing qualification
Yeah.
pole position. It was unbelievable if you look at all the corner he turned. And heads off to him, but we knew that, right? We both picked him.
Yes, we knew that. We were right. I guess I might have to switch mine up. I just can't pick Max Verstappen every week, or maybe I can.
Yeah.
We'll see. So make sure you hang on to the end of the episode. We're going to discuss some listener comments that have come in. Also, we'll discuss the implied probabilities for the Bahrain individual drivers plus the teams. I can also compare a little bit based on what they look like, the numbers heading into the Japan Grand Prix just from last weekend. And also, if you are yet to follow at Roscoe Poop Scoop, do it on Twitter at the _G Warner, of course, for sports across all the sports that you could ever want. And if you could subscribe to the channel at the _G Warner on YouTube, Betting the Pitch on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. We will always accept 5-star reviews. And if you make it F1 related, I'll find a way to get Angel to read it off. Whatever you say, within reason. If it's worse, I'll probably have to take it on myself. But all 5-star reviews, all comments like that are certainly valuable to us and will potentially get us maybe in front of more sponsors, advertisers, all those sort of things. Though maybe if you want to keep us quiet and keep us to yourself, then don't do it. But I'm not telling you to do that. Please leave a 5-star review. They're huge for the search rankings. So as we move from Japan to now into Bahrain, so yes, we call Japan well, but unfortunately, what have you done for me lately? So now we have a new race, and it's up to at Roscoe Poop Scoop and myself at the _G Warner to come up with kind of what's changed from last weekend to this weekend. So we saw Max Verstappen; he was winner last weekend, third most likely to win heading into the Japan race, and that was a plus 650 underdog, so 13.33333% implied probability. This week, he's still that Max Verstappen, that it is third most likely to win, but he's plus 450 this time. So he's increased about 5% in probability. Lando Norris still the favorite, though a much smaller favorite than he was last week, or excuse me, much bigger favorite from 40% implied probability to 46.5. Oscar Piastri has climbed the mountain yet again. He is behind. Lando Norris in the second most likely position. He's at plus 175, implied probability of 36.36%. What do you think about, I guess, these numbers kind of coming together? Do we now think that Max Verstappen should be closer to the top with Lando and Oscar? I know you've been a believer in the McLaren car being better than everyone else's. Has your opinion on that changed?
Uh, no, McLaren still has the best car. Although heading into the Bahrain, there's a couple of things to notice, right? I don't think we focus too much on the previous episode. Is George Russell's performance had been surprisingly good compared to as an end result. He had always, I think he finished top three in Australia and then in China in the Chinese GP, right? Um, and the other thing is that shows sort of Mercedes, right? Because like you guys know, Hamilton was with Mercedes for the past decades, over decades. So I've been following Mercedes as my constructor for the longest time. Although coming into this year, Mercedes also had very consistent performance on the car, and now they can truly focus on improving the performance on the track, right? So I think that from a constructorship perspective, that one is to watch this weekend. And the other one is actually Ferrari. They brought a new floor. Like, remember, we talk about throughout the season, you can bring upgrades. And the Ferrari actually this weekend brought a new floor into their car for the Bahrain. And so hopefully I think that will deliver some, but I still have question mark given like I really didn't have a good handle coming from a Chinese from Australia, and last week it was, so-so. So I don't know if that would be too much of difference on the Ferrari overall performance. So in my mind, I think from a constructorship perspective, right? A constructor perspective for the weekend, McLaren is still the top, like we mentioned. And I would say Mercedes actually is probably better than Red Bull. And then is Ferrari, and then is Red Bull. So
Okay.
that's kind of my ranking.
Well, let me come in. So the odds makers have for this weekend's Bahrain Grand Prix, they have McLaren minus 500. So a McLaren driver, you mentioned constructorship, pretty much the team as opposed to an individual driver is what there's two drivers for each team. McLaren is minus 500, so an implied probability of 83% to win this event. That's what happens when you have the two favorites in Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri on the same team. Red Bull are second at 4-1 odds, so 20% that they'll win. Ferrari comes in next, then Mercedes, and then we get a much further down the line, I guess, to find Williams, Racing Bulls, et cetera, et cetera. There was, I guess, a little bit of a change from Japan to Bahrain, where same list of favorites, but McLaren's become a much bigger favorite in this event, despite Max Verstappen and Red Bull winning the last race. Does that surprise you at all?
No, I think one thing Red Bull just people don't really notice, right? Like Red Bull, the car itself hasn't been that great to like because you can see that from the second driver, and Max winning the race last week with sheer Max, the sheer Max effect and the magic that he brings. So I think from like the car constructor perspective, Red Bull being second is surprising to me. But then like McLaren, like I mentioned, Ferrari and the Mercedes should be higher than that, just because again we're comparing both driver, right? Both of Ferrari driver are seasoned and very experienced. And Mercedes, George Russell have been very consistent. Even the youngest driver on the track, Kimi, is being also pretty consistent. It's just Red Bull is the only person holding that is Max, right? Um,
So that's I think where maybe there's a little bit of a discrepancy here. So you're talking about the constructorship, really talking about the entire team, both drivers and how they
yeah,
finish. I think this
yeah.
line that I'm citing is just that the winner, which team it comes from, and that was what makes Max Verstappen
Okay,
much more valuable, I think, than looks like
I see.
Sonoda, the other driver for Red Bull. which is interesting, and of course there are little discrepancies between those sort of things, and you might get better odds or prices at another sports book. So I'm using current lines as a bet online as a few seconds ago. So we'll see. I mean, I think what's most interesting to me, what you've said so far, Angel, at Roscoe Poop Scoop on Twitter, is that it seems to me that you have a little bit more of a belief in Ferrari than the market does. Is that because of this change they put in with the new floor, as you mentioned?
I think it's because of the change, and it's also because it's a fourth race of the season, and Hamilton. Whenever you make a transition, there's an acclimation period, right? And all the pedal, like the steering wheel, is different from what he's used to for the past like 15, 13 years.
Mm.
So I think he spent a lot of time like I listened to the radio on during the race for like Australia Grand Prix, right? They were like, "Oh, try this button just as a practice." It's a race that's actually happening. Because there's just a learning curve for even an experienced driver moving to a new team because all the culture, all the setup. That being said, I think it's just Hamilton. I expect a little bit improvement from his performance from this weekend over the past three. And I think Leclerc gonna improve because of new floor, to be honest.
Okay, so that brings us to some notes from our listeners that come in with, I think, more on the F1 podcast than any of the other ones I do, which is hilarious. But please keep sending them at the real underscore G Warner on any social media platform, Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, YouTube, anything, or at Roscoe Poop Scoop. Though I will do the scooping, I guess, of putting this all together. So one of my long-term Patreon subscribers, followers, subscribers, Joe Dollar came in with his summary, and I think he wants Angel to respond to this. So, not a lot of eye catchers this week for Bahrain GP. I was looking at some historical data, and Leclerc has done very well at this track. I don't love him for the race based on his current form, but he's worth a nibble for the pole at 11 to 1 odds. What do you think? And then he comes back a few days or hours later and said, disregard my comments on Leclerc. He is still shitty. So I don't know exactly where Joe is at this point. Help Joe figure out where he is. Do you like him to potentially win the poll?
Okay, I think a pole is gonna be challenged for Leclerc. I think the Ferrari this season, just from what I observe, the way they set up their car is more for the race. Again, there are some cars they set up because again, we talked about last weekend, right? You set up your car before your qualification, and that will be your setup for the weekend. And some people like tend to set up their car more geared towards a quali, and some more geared towards a race day. Because again, like your fuel and all the other things you have to consider. And that depends. Like a Japanese is supposed to like everyone should be set up for quali because it's just so hard to overtake. Um, I just don't think a Ferrari had like tend to set it up for the quali, meaning like I don't know if they gonna be able to take the pole, to be honest. Um, and I so for that reason, I don't think he's gonna be taking the pole. I think he could do better during the race than his qualification. Um, but I still don't like I see his comments. Like I agree, Leclerc has been performing really well from the past few seasons. And the last week, I even indicate I really hope Ferrari can come through during the Bahrain. And this morning, I was watching the free practice results. I just still don't see as much, even with a new floor. I'm still confident that Ferrari as a constructor is better than Red Bull, but I just don't think they are there yet.
Got it. Okay. And so we see Leclerc who finished fourth in Japan after a fifth place finish in Shanghai, which was I guess eliminated because he was disqualified. But so we've got a new floor from Ferrari. To continue on, do you see a lot of racers maybe not finishing this 90% rule in order to become classified? Joe has pointed out classified under 18 and a half. So that would, I think, mean, based on my simple math of 20 to getting to 18, that means two drivers would not finish and would
Mm,
not be considered classified. Classified, you must finish 90% of the laps that the winner does finish.
yeah. So potentially either someone crashed out or just have a car issue. I think that's an interesting one. Bahrain does tend to have like safety car deploy. So whenever that happens, it means someone crashed out, right? So, I think 18 out of 20. I think it's still gonna be like at least like a 19 or 20. I don't
Okay.
think a two will be DNF.
Okay, so his line is minus 110 right now. So that's basically juice split both ways, 50-50 shot with some juice built in there for the sports books. So that's, I guess, Angel at Roscoe Poop Scoop on the other side of Joe Dollar on classified. She'll go over 18 and a half, it sounds like. And Joe's going under 18 and a half. A couple more things we're gonna get to. Angel is fighting through some sickness. So thank her for being a team player. As always, we don't expect that, but we appreciate it. He does have he actually outlined safety car, yes, minus 150. So you just mentioned that. Seems like you are simpatico on that one. He also has Mercedes have both cars top six is on his list. So you talked about the improvement of George Russell. Looks like the youngest Kimi Antonelli is they were fifth and sixth in Japan. How do you feel about? I mean, you spoke pretty highly of Mercedes. You certainly don't like the Red Bull, I guess, as much as Ferrari. How would you? So I guess in terms of Joe's talk about having both Mercedes drivers finish top six, that would to me sounds like a Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, both Mercedes driver, and there's still one more that's still in that top six to allow that to happen. Um, so, do you agree with that? Do you think Lewis Hamilton might be a problem or a threat to the Mercedes drivers both finishing top six?
So what's the odds for the Mercedes to have both car in top six?
So minus 120. So that's pretty much
Oh,
the way I see
yeah.
most prices. That's like probably about 58% or something like that you'd be
Okay.
required to hit. So more likely than not. So I don't know that Joe's necessarily going out on a long shot limb here, but it does seem to me that based on recent finishes, that seems pretty safe to potentially pick, but no bets are safe at minus 120.
Yeah, I think earlier when I mentioned the constructor, McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, right? That's kind of my ranking for the week, meaning Mercedes actually second in both of drivers. So I actually agree with the potential outcome of like both of Mercedes driver finishing top six.
Okay.
Um, I think this weekend, one thing to really, it's because we spent a lot of time the past few races talk about the car itself, the engineering, the performance, and the driver's ability. But what's coming into Bahrain, what's exciting, and it's just like a lot play the unknown part. The factor is the strategy. And we haven't really talked much about the strategy or the tire management. And Bahrain gonna be the racetrack to show that because the track is not far from the desert, so you have tons of sand coming through. That really which robs your tire a lot quicker, right? So require the driver to whisper and manage their tire. And when you have a race that require you change tire, and then that comes into your team strategy. When do I pit them? What tire do I start? How do I offset them? Like if I have within 1 second or 2 seconds to catch the person ahead of me, can I pit them early to try to like play that to catch them up with a newer tire, to offset that performance. So I think that's one thing to watch. But what I'm trying to talk, coming back to the Mercedes comment, is I think among the top four cars, historically speaking, Red Bull had always been better at strategy. And Mercedes is probably second. And McLaren, because of team dynamic, because they have a perfect car, so there's always that favoritism play into it. There's that dynamic, and they may m mess up their strategy.
Between Lando and Oscar, you're saying about who
Yeah,
pits
between
first.
Lando and yeah, and Ferrari, people make a joke about the Ferrari strategy is a strategist is like a clown, right? So, like you see all this meme from like 2023 when they really had an amazing car. But all that being said, I think all things considered, right? Like Mercedes, the two driver with their experience with their car and with their consistent team strategy, I think they do have a chance to be like top six.
Okay. Sounds like we're endorsing Joe Dollar. Take that, though I think you've already bet it. But still, that's, I think, a really good way to get some listeners coming in. And we, of course, will accept any sort of input, unless you're making fun of Angel, then I will censor it. You can make fun of me as much as you want, but Angel's putting all of her intellect out there, and I'm just kind of riffing off what she says. But so that I think is probably better for a more brief edition of the Betting the Pitch Presents F1 episode. Just trying to get as much out of Angel's voice as possible for today. Maybe this is a better setup also for future races. But of course, as the season gets more down the line, we have less to introduce and less to talk about. The last question I'll get to before we get to our best bets, and we'll do a recording to put it on social media. I'm just curious, Angel, how you compare the tire degradation from this Bahrain GP versus Japan? Because I know you mentioned that on last week's episode, and it seems to me like the weather looks about as sunny as you could ever expect in the desert of Bahrain this weekend.
Yeah, the tire degradation gonna be worse in Bahrain. Japanese Grand Prix actually it was I think the Chinese Grand Prix actually really had a lot like degradation impacts, right? And Japanese was actually not so bad. Um and which kind of is another reason why it turned out to be a boring race for a fan because if you can play the sort of the strategy and higher offset, you kind of just expect the quality finish, right? Um, but this week, with the sand, with the temperature, you're gonna see a lot of um, yeah, pretty bad tire worms and also early stop to try to play the offside and or you go on hard from the beginning and try to wait for the safety car, right? So any scenario can happen in this race, which is why I think I'm quite excited for this one, and it's also a morning one, which be a lot easier than the night race to
Sure,
watch.
sure. As they move west, they get closer to waking hours for us, which
Yes.
I love that the from other podcasts on this channel, like the soccer podcast I do every week, the 5:30 a.m. Serie A on Sunday is really tough in Italy for me to get up for. But
Yeah.
I realize that life is about priorities. Thank you for prioritizing your time, Angel, to coming back on the Betting the Pitch F1 episode. So we're gonna get into our best bets. Before we get too deep, I just want to bring some attention. The Major League Baseball podcast will be coming back to the Betting the Pitch podcast network. Had a long negotiation strategy session about tire degradation and baseball degradation just this past weekend at A Brooks Bets. So look forward to that on this channel. We will be recording a special Friday night episode on pregame.com with Munaf Maji going through the entire Saturday baseball card that's recording tonight. Other things that are going to be out there, soccer podcast, of course, as well. I'm just going to be podcasting until the cows come home tonight, I guess. But we're here knocking this out on the afternoon of Friday, April 11th. So at Roscoe Poop Scoop, where would you like to go for your best bet on this episode? Let's keep in mind that we both won our pick with Max Verstappen to win the race last week in the Japanese GP.
Maybe let's start with top three.
Okay.
Um, I think Lando and Oscar will be in top three.
Okay.
It's more about where they finish, and it's also about who's the other third driver, right?
Okay. Okay.
Um, let's maybe just go off sort of where everyone is standing based on the money line, right? Max, um, I think he just won a race, and he won a race based on his technical, based on all the his technicality of a drive and performance.
Sure.
And this weekend is very different. I don't know if odds will follow him from Japan to Bahrain because the different situation, different track, and different sort of characteristics, right? Um, so I don't know if I'm betting on him finishing top three.
Okay.
And George Russell,
Mm,
which is number four in the line, and he only have about like 6% chance, like which is still it's very low from the number
very
three to
low.
four. Yeah.
Very low.
Um.
Based on the implied probability. Yes, I see 6%.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I guess when you remove one of the top three, the rest is all like pretty low. But I actually think George Russell have a very decent chance to be top three. Um. Again, because of his consistent performance, because of the consistent car, because of the consistent team collaboration, from like the Mercedes garage, like the chain, the tire, pit stop timing, and also the strategy call. So I actually think that he have a way higher chance to be in top three than what's being implied on the money line right now.
Okay, so I have found a number actually. So it looks like we do have a price on George Russell to finish top three, plus 150. So that means 100 US dollars will win you 150. That has implied probability of 40% odds. So
Oh, okay.
would you like to take that? Well, I didn't know how deep we wanted to reach, but thankfully,
Yeah.
and the ability that I've found in my life to multitask over years and years and years is that I have found a way to find a number, and it is available plus 150 George Russell to finish top three. I'm guessing that's where you're going on this episode, Angel Zhang.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I want us kind of narrow down a little bit because this race is like this one is so exciting for the fans, which to me is like making it a little bit hard to predict as compared to the Japanese Grand Prix, right? Um, Well, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, we also spoke a little bit early on, right? Charles, I think he's gonna potentially have a chance to get into top like number three potentially, but I I don't know. I just don't know where Ferrari. They just made so many bad strategy calls, and they have a lot of things to work through on their car, on their team, and they have probably the best lineup of the driver across all teams, but they just haven't delivered. Um, I'm hopeful that they will adjust the new floor and truly capitalize on that. But there's always a little bit comfort you have to get from the historical performance, which I have a little bit higher on George Russell as to compared to Charles. And similar situation as for Hamilton, it's a new team. He's still adjusting to it. It's been better, like you can see, but I think he's probably uncovering a lot more as he go, which is way different from how he used to work in the Mercedes garage, right? So, there's an acclimation and learning curve cost there. So all that said, my top three is Lando, Oscar, and George. And how would you bet against them three winning? Um, I it's so hard.
No, I think if you want to give out a winner, you can, but you've already given out a bet everyone can take that George Russell finishes third, and that is plus
Yeah.
150 odds. That is perfectly allowed for you to take that. If that's what you want to give for this episode, it's all yours. Take it, and I'll take the mic and I'll give which is along those similar lines. So let me get into it right now.
Okay.
You've done all you needed to, Roscoe Poop Scoop.
Okay.
I'm gonna make sure I get your Twitter done correctly. So when I put this video out, which I have not actually tweeted one of ours yet, but I will be. Don't worry. This is the episode for it. Okay, I think we're ready. Hey, this is real_G Warner on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. You've just been listening to Betting the Pitch Presents the Formula One episode. We just covered the Bahrain GP with my co-host partner at Roscoe Poop Scoop on Twitter, ROSCOE POOPSCOOP. And we have now done 3 episodes. We both gave out winners on Max Verstappen the last episode on the Japanese GP. She just gave out George Russell to finish top 3 at plus 150. I'm going along those similar lines. I'm following also one of our listeners at Joseph Dollar. He gave out and wanted us to talk about both Mercedes cars finishing top 6. I will join George Russell, one of those Mercedes drivers, so that works as well. I'll follow along my co-host and the expert that's thrown in some comments, and I'll go both drivers from Mercedes finish top 6 at minus 135. So let's go, Mercedes. Let's get the emblem and join us next week for the episode on whatever race is coming up next week. And we'll be back with you then.
Buddy.
Where are we going?
We're going to Saudi.
Oh, we're going to Saudi. We'll go from one desert to another desert, which I guess
Yep.
I guess might have probably a little bit different stages of wealth in those countries, but probably not too different now that I think about it. Weather will be
Money's
similar.
money.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about all the tire degradation you could ever want to hear about. Please feel free to throw in some comments for us for next week's episode. Thank you to Joe Dollar for being the one and the only so far, but giving us plenty of material to riff on. And it's, I think, also pushed us in the direction of Mercedes for this weekend's episode. So join us next week for Saudi Arabia episode. Hopefully Angel will feel a little bit better. Make sure you go hit her on Twitter at Roscoe, ROSCOE, Poop Scoop on Twitter. I think always seeing more followers will certainly make my throat feel better. And we'll join you next week on a to be decided type of day. We're usually shooting for Thursday evenings. But stay with us, stay tuned. Make sure you follow on Twitter at @the_real_G Warner. Follow the podcast at @the_real_G Warner on YouTube. Hit Betting the Pitch on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify to make sure you don't miss the next episode. So feel better, Angel. We'll see you next week, and go Mercedes.